Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to cover how to install Windows 10 onto a VM and then clone that VM to a physical disk. This is going to allow you to keep a prepped install of your OS, including any commonly used programs, on a portable USB drive. It's going to make it really easy to deploy at any time. With this method you're going to save a bunch of time by avoiding first run updates and installing things like antivirus or word processors or your favorite browser or anything like that. Just a quick note, during this guide you are going to make a bootable USB Windows install. So if you are ever wondering about how to create a bootable operating system off of your USB, this is how you do that as well. I won't get into that though, because that's not really the point of this guide. Before we get into things for this tutorial, you're going to need a couple things. You're going to need two USB thumb drives. One's got to be at least 32 gigabytes, and I highly recommend USB 3.0. The other one can be quite a bit smaller because it just has to hold a bootable copy of our clone software. You're also going to need an ISO of Windows. Windows 10 ISOs are available free from Microsoft's website. It is the first result in Google when I typed in Microsoft Windows 10 ISO. We're going to need a copy of CloneZilla. CloneZilla is available for free online. We're going to need a copy of Rufus, same thing, available free online. And then we're going to need a copy of VMware Workstation. You're going to have to buy a copy of VMware Workstation or find your own somehow. I'm not going to tell you how to go about finding your own copy. You got to figure that one out yourself. Once you've got all these resources I mentioned, we're going to be good to go, and we can start by opening VMware Workstation. First thing that we're going to have to do is create a virtual machine. So we're going to create a custom machine. Settings fine. We're going to point the installer disk image file to our Windows 10 ISO that we downloaded. We're going to give it a name. That name is just is fine. It's descriptive enough. We're going to make sure we have an FE firmware. I'm going to assign a couple extra processors and cores so we can get this done with some semblance of speed. This is pretty important here. When you're allocating memory, leave it at 2 gigs. We don't want to allocate more memory because this is also going to affect the installs HyperSys file as well as paging file, and we want to keep those as small as possible so they fit on our transfer medium, the USB 3.0 stick. So click next, leave it at 2. Don't touch anything in the network types. Leave these next 2 settings as recommended. We're going to create a new virtual disk. We're going to create a 25 gigabyte disk, so pretty small. We're going to store the virtual disk as a single file. You can allocate disk space if you want. I'm running on SSDs, and I find the amount of time it takes to allocate disk space is about the same amount of time that I end up saving, so I'm going to skip it. But it's very important to store a virtual disk as a single file. Asking you where you want to save your disk file, so if you have multiple hard drives, just make sure it's on a fast one, or this could take a bit longer. This looks fine, so we're going to click Finish. It's going to create our virtual machine, and I'm going to power on the machine. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the first part. Basically what you're going to do now is just a normal Windows 10 install. I'm not going to go through that with you because I think everybody should know by now how to do a Windows 10 install. It's just following the instructions. One important thing though, before I cut the video, it's really important to not activate Windows, to not use a product key, okay? Because we don't want to associate a product key with this install yet. We probably want to do that when we get to the machine that we're actually going to clone this to, the target machine. That way our license is valid and everything. We don't have to worry about anything like that. Okay, I'm going to cut the video now, and I will come back once we are done the install. Okay, so now that Windows has finished installing, what we're going to do is download and install all the pending updates for Windows 10, along with some commonly used programs. For example, I like to have Malwarebytes and Google Chrome as a browser, so I'm going to fetch those. Edge not responding. Big surprise. Alright. So the other important thing that we have to do is get those updates done. So we're going to check for updates. There's going to be about 6 updates that we're going to have to install. If your Windows 10 install managed to fetch those updates during, you should be fine to skip this step, but definitely check. Alright, so I'm not going to make you guys watch all these updates go through, so I'll stop the video and come back when it's ready to go. But basically what we're doing here is this is the time where you're going to be able to make all the changes that you want to your machine, customize it. So you can do things like change the startup programs, turn off HyperSys or paging, maybe change the default programs Windows uses. Basically now is the time to make your machine run the way you want it to, or the way that your customers or clients are familiar with. One important thing though is do not uninstall any components of Windows, so like Groove Music or Xbox, because the next step might not work for you if you do that. So now that we've got all of our updates downloaded and installed, our commonly used programs installed and configured, and we're happy with the way Windows is looking, we can log in here. Make sure you restart after you do all your updates and they all get applied. So now we're going to do a quick clean of the system. We're going to do this because we want to get rid of a bulk of the small files left over from the Windows install. So we're going to use the feature built in to Windows to clean those out. So we're going to get rid of everything here, because we don't need any of it. Alright. Also again, make sure you go into your downloads and get rid of everything in here. Clear that up. Empty your recycle bin. We're going to go back into disk cleanup, clean up system files. So it looks like we just got a couple megs that we can get rid of. We're going to then run CCleaner, and we're going to clean out as much stuff with CCleaner as we can. So I'm going to have basically everything highlighted here. We don't need to wipe our free space. Get rid of everything from Chrome. Everything. This is going to save us another 40 megs of space. That's not much, but it's the little files that take the time to transfer. And we've got rid of quite a few of them. A few hundred files there to save us a little bit of time. Okay, so now that we are done with cleaning the system, we are going to do what's called a sysprep. So when you install an operating system to your hardware, their operating system takes a look at your system and it configures itself to work with your system's particular hardware. These configurations are called system IDs or SIDs. And when you're going to migrate your install to dissimilar hardware, it's very important that you get rid of these SIDs because they will cause conflicts, potentially. There's a very much larger chance that your computer will not work. If you don't do this, then it will. So we're going to go to our local disk, we're going to go to Windows, we're going to go to our System32 file, and then under System32 we are going to go to sysprep, open sysprep, and here is our sysprep application. We're going to open that. We're going to make sure we have Enter System Out of Box Experience selected, and then we're going to generalize that. If you're interested in learning more about sysprep, you can check out the Windows documentation for it. Then we're going to select Shut Down. We're doing this because we definitely do not want our computer to restart and then begin to load Windows again, or else it'll reapply the system identifiers for the current hardware, which is what we're trying to avoid. If that does happen, or you screw up, you're going to have to sysprep again. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video here, because this is going to take a couple minutes, and I will begin the video once sysprep is finished. Once sysprep is done, our virtual machine is going to be in a powered off state. So that's where we'll pick up. Now that our VM is in a powered off state, we're going to go up here and we are going to power on to firmware. It's very important that we do not just power it on, we need to power on to firmware. Then we're going to go to removable devices, CD, DVD, SATA, and down to settings. We need to use an ISO image file, and we're going to point to our CloneZilla Live. You also need now to insert the USB 3.0 or whichever stick you're going to use to hold your sysprepped and cloned operating system into the machine. So then once that's done, we're going to go down here and click on Mass Storage Device, and we're going to connect it. This is going to disconnect the USB stick from the actual computer and connect it to our VM. Okay, so now we're going to click onto the boot manager so we can input to it, and we're going to select FE VMware Virtual SATA CD-ROM drive and boot from that. So select that by pressing Enter. This is going to launch CloneZilla for us. We're going to select the default value, which is the first option. It's going to take about 30 seconds for us to load up here. It's very important that you follow along exactly with what we're doing here, and I would highly suggest that you remove all other devices from your computer. Not like your mouse and keyboard, but remove all other USB devices from your computer just to avoid confusion, because what we're going to do here is potentially destructive to any data that we're not specifically working with here. So we're going to select the default UTF-8 English. We're not going to touch the key map. And we're going to start CloneZilla. We're going to go device to device, and we're going to select beginner mode. We're going to do disk to local disk, and we're going to select our source disk as our VMware virtual disk, and we're going to select our destination disk as our USB 32 gig USB stick. We're going to skip disk checking and repairing on the source file system because we just made this file system and there shouldn't be any errors associated with it. So just click OK. And then the action to perform when everything is finished, we're going to power off. And it's going to ask us press Enter to continue. Hit Enter. Then we're going to get two more warnings. Yes, please, and yes, please. Okay, so it's going to load all the information that it needs and begin the transfer. So I'll just show you guys the beginning of that. And once it starts, if everything goes as planned, shouldn't have any errors. And the next thing that'll happen is when it's all completed transferring is your VM will enter its powered off state and shut down. Okay, so I will restart this video when this process is all completed, and the next thing that should happen is your VMware machine should be
just in a powered off state.
Now that our cloning operation is complete and our VM is in a powered off state, we can remove the 32 gig USB stick from the computer, minimize or close our VM, and open Rufus. Then we can take our smaller USB thumb drive and insert it into our computer, select it from Rufus, click down here for a source disk image, and point towards our CloneZilla image. Then click Start. You're going to want to write in ISO image mode. This is going to take about a minute and a half. That's about it. Once this is done, you can take your CloneZilla bootable USB stick and your 32 gigabyte USB 3.0 stick, and you can insert them into your target computer. Then you're going to press the key associated with your target computer to make it either display a boot menu or boot into BIOS or UEFI or EFI, and from there you can select the CloneZilla USB and boot from that. And then all you're going to do is copy, just as we did before, but instead of selecting your source disk as the virtual machine disk or as the physical disk in this case, all you're going to do is select your USB stick as the source disk, and the destination disk will be whatever physical device you're copying it to. Once that's done, all you have to do is turn on the computer and you'll go through the first run. I will make a video detailing that process as well, but I'm not going to include it in this video because it's not really necessary. Alright, I'll link to that though.